Hi everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo, bringing you another video, and today it's a contest entry being offered by Rob at the channel Sounds Strange. And I'm I am a new subscriber to his channel. Really interesting. His focus is primarily on classical orchestral music and jazz also, but his tastes are very eclectic. And he is, as far as I can gather, he's an Irishman expatriate living in Spain. And he has a vast perceptible knowledge of orchestral music, particularly of post-war 20th century orchestral music. So he has this contest in which the first 5 questions are ones that I answer about my musical experiences and my record collecting. And then the next 5 are about him. You know, I'm supposed to answer these questions about him, and it's quite a challenge because I have not been following his channel for very long, just a few weeks, and it, puts me at a disadvantage because I haven't been regularly viewing his videos. So, man, some of the questions about him, I was able to use deduction, and I think I came to very reasonable answers. But the other ones, wow, I just really struggled with, particularly the last question, which I essentially just bailed on. But anyway, let's get started with this. And his first question is a record with a literary connection. So the one, I have several to go with this one. And one that came to mind pretty quickly is this one, Pink Floyd, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which, let me pull a, well, I guess it didn't make any difference because this the hype sticker is still on the shrink wrap. But the Piper at the Gates of Dawn, the debut album for Pink Floyd, the title comes from a chapter in a children's story, The Wind in the Willows, which was a favorite story of Syd Barrett, who was then the lead guitarist and primary songwriter of Pink Floyd with that debut. And he had some songs also on their next release, Saucer Full of Secrets. But he had a lifelong impact on the band in the direction its music went. His influence was always there, even after he was gone. Syd has many songs that have these connections to literary stories or poems, where the lyrics to the song, he would take directly from a poem or book and then, write the music around it, or sometimes put a whimsical spin on it. An incredible singer-songwriter. Now, some other ones that I also pulled out was this one, the opera, Purcell's opera, Dido and Aeneas. So this is based on a story. Well, Dido is a queen and Aeneas is this hero, Greek myth hero. And also the cover art is from a painting in the 1600s. So that would make it a 17th century painting. And it's Dido and Aeneas at Carthage by Claude Lorraine. And Claude Lorraine was a contemporary of Purcell because Purcell lived from 1659 to 1695, and Claude Lorraine was 1600 to 1682. So nice cover art to go with this particular recording, which was by the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. I've had this for a really long time. It's a really, really nice recording. But anyway, back to the literary connection. So the tales of Aeneas were in, Virgil wrote about him, and also he's mentioned in the Iliad, and also some other stories there. There's a lot of classical and orchestral pieces, even if we exclude opera, that have literary inspirations or connections. And so one more, well, actually it's not one more, it's one more that I have in this vein would be this one here, Noah's Flood, or Noah's Flood. This is a Chester Miracle play set to music by Benjamin Britten. And I became aware both of this piece, and then let me show it this way, my head over here, of Benjamin Britten from the Wes Anderson film, Moonlight Kingdom, which is a delightful and whimsical story about a boy who runs away with a girl and the angst that they cause in their maritime town because a big storm well, initially they don't know about the big storm. This is back in the days when hurricane prediction wasn't all that great. But anyway, it's a fairly prominent theme in the background of the entire film. And so it set me on a hunt to find a recording. This one, there are a few out there. This one was the one I was hot for and eventually found and decided this was the one I wanted, and I do really, really enjoy this. And along the way, I also picked up an opera that Benjamin Britten had written, and then also another orchestral piece, finding his music really quite good, and I'm enjoying it. I'm trying to remember the name of the opera right now, and I cannot recall. It's about a soldier, a man from a family in which all the men, offspring, you know, they were commanders in the military, etc. And he makes a decision that he is not going to follow that same path, and he's going to renounce the violence of his family's heritage being in the military, which creates all kinds of angst. So one more I wanted to mention, I don't have a copy of it, but there's a book by Dalton Trumbo, who is one of the most famous screenwriters for Hollywood. He was blacklisted in the 50s and into the 60s and had to write under pseudonyms, or he would give his scripts to not playwrights, but screenwriters who were not blacklisted but sympathetic to him, and then they would pass it off as their own material. And so there were a lot of movies made in which the screenplay is going to say written by someone else and not Dalton Trumbo, who in fact wrote it. He was among the greatest screenwriters in Hollywood history. We're talking Spartacus. We're talking about Exodus. We're talking about, just some pretty amazing ones. I think he wrote the screenplay for Breakfast at Tiffany's as well. which is based upon, the short story. But anyway, he wrote a book that was also quite an underground success, and that was Johnny Got His Gun, an anti-war book that's basically, the storyline is this fellow is fighting in World War I, and he steps on a landmine or gets hit by shrapnel or something from a rocket, and then he wakes up in the hospital and gradually comes to realize he has no limbs, no arms, no legs. He can't see. He can't speak because he has no face. But he's still alive. And he's trying to communicate with the medical staff. And it's just an amazing, amazing story, which was made into a film also. And I was talking to some students at a private school that I worked at in the 1980s. And I was telling them about, different books I read. Part of this, presentation kind of thing. And I started talking about the book, Johnny Got His Gun. And I saw this one student, his eyes just like lit up. And he came to me afterward and he told me about the song One, O-N-E, One, by Metallica. And he said, that's what that song is about. That's exactly what that song is about. And I was like, oh, wow. He showed me the song. I listened to it and I'm going, you're right. This is based on Dalton Trumbo's book. And so, at least with him, it sparked an interest in, reading the book. It also sparked a slight interest in me in Metallica. But I still must admit, I'm a Metallica virgin. I do not own any vinyl, although there are a couple on my want list, but it's just not a high priority for me. So anyway, it's a lot there for just question number one. And let's move on to question number two, which is an album with an, there is one more that I have, and that's this one here. Peter and the Wolf, Prokofiev's. I'm counting that as a literary connection because even though I guess this is kind of like a classic or even over-the-top tone poem, I don't know. But, it's got this story to go with the music, or actually, I think the music was created and then the story was created around the music. Maybe it was the other way around. But anyway, this was one of the first albums I ever listened to as a child. And so I eventually found, a copy. I remember from that because this album, there's nothing on the back. It's just this here on the front with the sort of foil front. The album insert with the record has this on it here, which when you slip it into the slipcase, it kind of gives it this appearance of being a book. And it's just really fascinating. This is a later reissue because I think the copyright on this is from like the 1940s or something like that. But very cool label, the Angel Records label, very nice. And then it's kind of neat on this inner sleeve, this information here. It says, take good care of your records. Check your gramophone needle regularly. A worn needle will give poor reproduction of your records. A chipped needle will permanently damage them. And so I just thought that was pretty cool. Your gramophone. So anyway, a lot of literary records that I have. All right, the next question is a record with an artistic connection. And the clarification was, yeah, like a work of art, a sculpture or something like that, as opposed to a literary work. And one that immediately came to mind was this one by Sonic Youth, Daydream Nation. And you see the cover. And on the back too is this. And that's because these are from Gerhard Richter paintings or watercolors or something. And there's one in the Art Institute here in Chicago. And I remember the first time being there. It's in the Modern Art Wing. And the first time that I was going through there and I saw, if not this exact painting, or one that was very close, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's on the cover of a Sonic Youth album. So I thought that was really quite cool. I got these signatures because Steve Shelley here and Thurston Moore were here in Chicago a couple winters ago promoting a sort of concert film about the band. Plus Thurston Moore and Steve Shelley, because by this time, you know, they pretty much were on their solo careers, were doing a live performance at the Art Institute, which I could not make. It was sold out, even though I'm a member. I didn't know about it in time, and it was sold out. And I really would have loved to have gone because I wanted to, if I could, get a photo of them next to that painting. That would have been so cool. Some other ones that, or one other, I should say, that I'm going to go with is this released by Edgar Varese. And so this is the Ofrendas Integrales Actandra and Equatorial, the Contemporary Chamber Ensemble. Arthur Weisberg, conductor. And the reason I'm including this is because of this image on the front cover, and also this image on the back cover. And I don't know if Edgar Varese painted these or created these pieces of art. But actually, so you can see this one here in blue, and then when you look at this one, you can see that this is the same image, except it's in a different color palette. And it really reflects well the composition of the music on the recording. That while there are these jarring and strange connections in the music, there is a connection, and there is something being expressed, that it is not chaos or random. All right, so next question is a record with a historical connection. This one didn't come to mind immediately. Now the historical connection is there. I did some searching with different historical events and, you know, looked at the years, etc. And then I started looking up albums that were released at that time. And it led me to this one, Bob Dylan's Love and Theft. This was released on September 11th, 2001. It was among many records that were released that day. But this is the one I have. And so there's that historical connection. Another one that initially came to mind was this one, Traffic's John Barleycorn Must Die, because the song John Barleycorn is a traditional song that goes back centuries. And I don't believe that there's an actual credit for that, because it is one of those traditional songs. Yeah, it just says traditional. And so the arrangement was Stevie Winwood and maybe Mark Capaldi together. And on a record, it says between the years of 1900 and 1910, Cecil Sharp collected a number of songs, John Barleycorn among them. The many versions of this song are said to have come from Oxfordshire, Sussex, Hampshire, Surrey, and Somerset. And there are estimated to be between 100 and 140 versions. The earliest known copy is of the age of James I and Pepoisian, in the Pepoisian collection, 1465, printed in black letter by H. Gorson from 1607 to 1641. The popular interpretation is the effort of the people to give up the alcohol distilled from barley. But in the last verse, and little Sir John with his nut brown bowl and his brandy in his glass, and little Sir John with his nut brown bowl proved the strongest man at last. So anyway, there's that historic connection with this traditional song through many areas of Great Britain in connection with John Barleycorn and the distilling of spirits. All right, so next question. A record not sung in English. So, gosh, I'm already on 21 minutes here. This is going to be kind of long. But anyway, when I was visiting Taiwan, this been at least 10 years ago. And after I was visiting, the person I was seeing there in Taiwan, he took me to the airport, and I asked him, who or what should I buy in terms of music that represents Taiwan? And he showed me this. So this is a mini box set of the greatest hits, so to speak, of a pop artist, Taiwanese pop artist, Chang Yushen. And of course, I couldn't listen to it, but I took his word. He recommended another one that was more hip-hop-ish, and while good, it really wasn't necessarily my taste. And this one, however, when I got home and I began to listen, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, yes, they're pop songs, but this guy's voice is just amazing. Somebody else that I know from Hong Kong was telling me that he's often been called the Taiwanese Whitney Houston because he has this incredible range, high-end range in his voice. And, it's all sung in Taiwanese or in Mandarin. And I nonetheless, from his voice, I get the sense of what's going on in these songs. Some of them are whimsical songs looking at the past and from childhood growing up to be a man. Others are anti-war songs or pro-environmental. I can hear some of this coming through even though I do not understand. And it did set me on an effort to get some vinyl. And I'm successful so far. I have this one of his releases. I had to buy this from, this one I did buy from Taiwan, a seller, but it's made in Japan. And these are all limited releases, limited pressings of his records, and so they're expensive. And this one too, when I finally got it, I'm gonna need, it's still on my want list because it arrived warped. For a $50 album, getting it warped is, but it's playable. And then this was the first one that I got. Okay, so, and I do enjoy listening to them. I have, in fact, Chinese friends of mine and Taiwanese friends of mine, I've asked them to translate some of the songs for me. And then the rough translations, I would look at them and go, yeah, that's what I thought, the song was about. And then I would try and craft English lyrics, because literal translations of one language to another, especially when you're talking about poetry or music, the meter and intonation and everything, it just doesn't make sense. Plus, the idioms don't translate well. So listening to the song, for one of them, I did end up writing a set of lyrics that closely fit the theme of the music in that. So, but anyway, it's very fascinating. And another one that I went to a show here in Chicago. It was in Grant Park. They had the Grant Park Summer Music Series here in Chicago, and Willie Colon was there, and all the songs are in Spanish, and it was an amazing crowd. I was so amazed by the joy and enthusiasm by the people who were there listening to his music. I was like, I love the music, and I know a little bit of Spanish, and I kind of would, guess what, but still, the music just transcends all of that. And also, when I did find albums, Hector Lavoe was his singer, in the early days, who has a beautiful, beautiful voice. A former roommate of mine, his father died this year of COVID. And he was telling me, yeah, my father loved Hector Lavoe. And just an amazing, amazing voice. Even though it's being sung in Spanish, I really, I really enjoy it. All right, record that taught me something. I got to move along here. This is getting long. I present this one, and the reason Freak Out taught me something is because of this. The information inside here had led me and continues to lead me to many other sources of music, because what Frank did here was list musical inspirations. And some of them are authors, some of them are artists, some of them are composers. Edgar Varese is listed here, Stravinsky is listed here, Schoenberg is listed here. So there are many others. Some of them, you look at them and you might think, is this is the influence a little bit of satire or something like that? But I continue to use this. This is how I discovered Eric Dolphy, and so he's got Maurice Lavelle, a lot of blues people, everyone from Little Walter to let me quickly, Sonny Boy Williamson, just a lot of blues artists. So it's a great reference for me when I investigate and look up some of these names. So it definitely has taught me something in terms of both music and literature. And then another Frank Zappa album is Burnt Weeny Sandwich. And what this album taught me, the first time I was listening to it, I was probably around 12 or 13 years old. And what I learned from it is that you can create music with just about anything. And I'm not just saying sounds. You can create music. I mean, there's this delightful little short piece in here that has some horns and woodwind, but they're also accompanied by bicycle horns. And then there are other pieces that are, very percussive, that sticks on wood blocks and tiny cymbals and triangles, creating this music. This is probably the Varese influence in there, and perhaps even some Stravinsky, who are probably the two most influential composers that Zappa has publicly acknowledged, influencing his music. So anyway, that was something, a record that really opened my mind in terms of the possibility of music. Then more recently was this. This is the album Eskimo by The Residents. And I knew about The Residents back in the 1980s, early 1980s, but I never listened to them. Very experimental, very avant-garde, very out there. You know, and I like me some Captain Beefheart, and you know, so I'm not afraid of an Eric Dolphy and Ornette Coleman. I'm not afraid of music that's way out there, but this is way out there. And you might even say that this particular release is not even music. It's sort of an experiment, an anthropological experiment. It is supposed to be covering the cultural activities of a group of Inuit, and like a sound documentary, but it's fictitious. It's all very fictitious. But the sounds that were recreated, and then there's like, you know, some a cappella singing, the singing of the Eskimos, so to speak, of their tales. It just, it reminded me how much music is tied up into a culture's history, and how it was often used for transmitting that culture through dance, through sounds and voice sounds, and particularly rhythm. I mean, the origin of music to me is rhythm. You know, it began with beating sticks on other sticks to make sounds in a rhythmic and musical nature, and then other instruments came later. The voice came next. The voice in percussive type instruments, that's the original music. And then the creation of other instruments, you know, came later. So that's the first 5, and by gosh, I'm already over 30 minutes. So this is going to take a long time to upload. But now the questions about Rob. So I'll go through these kind of quickly. I hope I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. The first one is name a favorite film of his and another soundtrack from the same year. And I kind of went with the simple one, saying, okay, 2001, A Space Odyssey, fantastic soundtrack. Although there was an original score written for the film, Kubrick didn't even tell the composer that he had opted to go with already recorded songs like, you know, the Blue Danube and the other pieces that show up on there. That was 1968. And another movie that came out in 1968 was The Graduate, which had lots of songs by Simon and Garfunkel. So I was kind of going that route there, but then I thought to myself, oh, wait a minute. Let's go back. I mean, this would have been before Rob was even born. That's kind of one of the later questions. I decided to go back even further because as I watched more videos and sort of was getting his oeuvre, I thought, okay, what about Alfred Hitchcock and Vertigo? Now, a friend of mine has always talked about how excellent the Vertigo soundtrack is. And it really is a very beautiful soundtrack. And then there was another soundtrack that came out or was released that same year. And I'm trying to think, when was that? It might have been 1958 or something like that. And that was the same year, was A Censure pour la fraude. And that was Miles Davis. And the soundtrack that Miles Davis created for the film is remembered much more strongly than the film itself. And he wrote it hastily, if you might say. What he did is he just, when he agreed to do it, he just wrote down a few themes. And then he played the themes for the other musicians and then said, okay, let's record it. They were also playing the film, I believe, while they were recording it, so that the music does match the film. And I thought, wow, that's just really amazing. So I'm going to go with that for the two films. The favorite film being Vertigo by Hitchcock, and then also a soundtrack from the same year, Censure pour la fraude, or fraude, I'm not sure. 1958, I believe. The second one, 2 albums from the month and year he was born. All right, well, he let slip in one of his videos about a record from 1985 that he was talking about, and he mentioned he was 11 years old. So I go, okay, he was born in 1974. And what month, though? 1974. So I'm looking through all the albums that were released in 1974, and then I saw Stevie Wonder's Fulfilling This First Finale. And I saw another one of your videos where you were talking about that album. So I thought, okay, it's July. You were born in July. And then what kind of sealed it for me was seeing that the Rory Gallagher's Irish tour of 1974 was also released, in July. I was looking at all the other albums, and I am kind of focused on albums that I was thinking that you would either own or enjoy, not something that just happened to be released, the year and month that you were born. So that's my answer. You were born in 1974 in July, and the 2 albums are Stevie Wonder's Fulfilling This's First Finale and Rory Gallagher's Irish Tour of 74. All right, 2 composers that you have the most records. And you had talked a lot about the post-war modern period of music, a lot. And so that seemed to be really significant. So I thought, okay, John Cage. Because also when I looked up John Cage, he's got a ton of releases. So just because of the availability of releases, I reasoned then that would be the bulk of your single composer category. However, you said that the 2, their names began with the same letter. And I'm presuming you meant last name, and all the other similar artists that had last names that began with C seemed really obscure and didn't have very big discographies. So anyway, I'm watching some more of your videos, and then you mentioned Sibelius as being one of your favorite composers. And I thought, well, okay, Sibelius is in that era of 20th century orchestral music, and not so much post-war. Sibelius is a little earlier. But then I thought, okay, Schoenberg would be a good one. But then I thought, we could just go with the basics, because another composer that you talked a lot about in reference to some of the tricky things that he would do stylistically with his music in dealing with the Soviet regime was Shostakovich. I remember playing Shostakovich when I was in high school in the band. Amazing, exciting music, difficult, really challenging music, but all the craziness going on in some of those songs or pieces, and then coming together and creating such amazing and beautiful music out of, when you view the different parts, they just seem so chaotic and a mess. So 2 composers that you have the most records of, I say Sibelius and Shostakovich. Which album inspired you to play guitar? You said you started playing guitar in 1990. So that would have made you about 16 years old. And again, I went with albums that were released in 1990 because unless you discovered an album that had been published or produced before 1990, and it wasn't until you were 16, which happens. There was a lot of music that was released long before I was 16, but I didn't discover it until I was 16. But to help me out, I went with it must be something that was released in 1990. And the two guitar-centric recordings that came out that year, one was by John Cale and Lou Reed, Songs for Drella, and then Neil Young, Ragged Glory. And that was a hard decision to go with because the style of guitar playing that Lou Reed employs in Songs for Drella, and plus there's that interesting connection, to Andy Warhol with the whole theme of the album, it's not flashy, it's not flamboyant guitar, but it's a style that lends itself very effectively to support a story being relayed in a song. And then you got Neil Young, Ragged Glory, a wall of noise kind of release. And being a 16-year-old and hearing that, I'd be like, yeah, it makes me want to play guitar too, but I was playing saxophone by then. And I did try the guitar later, but that's another story. Anyway, so I'm like, gosh, I don't know. And then, for the last question, listening to you play guitar, it kind of moves me towards the Lou Reed, John Cale release, Songs for Drella. I'm going to go with that one, even though there's still a part of me that strongly goes, man, it's Ragged Glory. I mean, listening to that, it's just, but I would have developed, I think, that type of style, and it doesn't seem like you did. So that's why I'm kind of going with the Songs for Drella. That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. Now, the last one, 5 tunes, name the tunes and the artist. I drew a blank on this. I'm sorry, I couldn't come up with anything. One of the songs does kind of have a Neil Young quality to it, but it's not quite the Neil Young picking style. Melodically, it's a little bit Neil Young, but it's not Neil Young picking style. And the other 4 songs definitely, to me, were not Neil Young. And in some of your videos, you talk a lot about Van Morrison, so I started thinking, well, maybe they're Van Morrison songs. But they were nothing I ever recognized. And you spent a lot of time talking about some Van Morrison records and other videos, but they're records that I don't have. And it was like, listening to one song and then listening to what you're playing. And no. I wasn't going to do that. So this one I'm kind of bailing on. I'm going to say, though, that, even the guy from Villagers, I can't remember his name. For all I know, of course, he only has 2 albums, and I have both of them. He might have a 3rd one. And is it Rory Gallagher? See, I'm leaning toward British, Irish-centric musicians. So for the artist, I'm going to say Van Morrison. You were playing songs by Van Morrison, but I don't know them, and I can't identify them. So that's my entry for the contest. I hope the rest of you out there kind of enjoyed this musical journey into myself. I hope then you are also curious. If you're not following the channel Sound Strong, do so. I'm really enjoying the channel and especially the information. I mean, I enjoy orchestral music. It's not a big chunk of my collection, but I do add to it from time to time. And I do really enjoy exploring, new composers, new sounds, and things like that. So I need to wrap this up. This is a 45-minute video, and I don't have very many places where I can do editing. So I'm just going to upload it like this. I hope you like this, and please remember to always enjoy your music.